One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Supporting other creators. It's one of my favorite things to do. And today's guest is not brand new to you. She's actually been on the show before, but the venture that she has gone into was just so exciting for me. I could not pass it up. And I'm so grateful to have her and her co-host join us for this super special interview. So I can't wait for you to hear my conversation with Zafira Rajan. She's been on the podcast before, and she is just a dreamboat. Like, I mean, if you listen to our conversation about email copy and the different things that we have, it was just so good. Like, go back and listen to it. Like, I'm getting all like stumbling around because it was such a fantastic interview, and I'll link to it in the show notes. But that was such a detour to what we're talking about today, because what we're talking about today is the project that Zafira and her partner Kirstie, or should I say her co-host, and what they created together as a creative project that they felt like they just had to get out into the world. So what they did is they created a show called Business After Baby. So this is a podcast that you can go listen to. And the conversation today is about all the behind the scenes. Y'all know I love a good behind the scenes. And I wanted to dive into why they created this project, why they felt the passion to have this message out into the world. And I just love all the practical things, like even to just, prep Kirstie because she hadn't been on the show before. I just said, my audience, like they're just a geek for everything behind the scenes. They want to know how you make the decisions that you make, whether it's your artwork or your topic, or even, should this be a 20-minute long episode or a 5-minute long episode? Like, we love all of those behind the scenes. And so we just had so much fun. So to remind you a little bit about Zafira. So Zafira is a copywriter and a brand strategist who helps entrepreneurs unblock their voice, harness their creativity, and write sensory stories that connect with their audience. She is an incredible copywriter and just a fantastic creative to follow on Instagram. She's super talented. And then Kirstie, I was so excited to meet her because she's also a copywriter, but she's also an ex-psychotherapist and a very good question asker who believes the best strategy for your business, what you sell, how you launch, the boundaries you set, the way you stretch and grow, all of it. And she loves talking about every aspect of business. But nothing fills her cup more than working with legends like you to nail that down. So it's such a great conversation. You're going to love all of this, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So here's my conversation with Zafira and Kirsty. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? All right, Profit Podcast listeners, we have a returning guest today, and she brought friends. This is what is so fantastic. So welcome back to the show, Zafira, and welcome, Kirsty. So happy to have you both here today.
So happy to be here.
I knew this was going to happen. I always have to tell people, I'm like, it gets real awkward when you get more than two people together, because then it's like, do you go? Do I go? Should we speak? Is this a awkward pause, or is this supposed to be like, oh, we're building the tension in the moment? So here, since you're the seasoned pro around here and you've been on the show before, Zafira, can you introduce yourself and let us know, what's going on, what's been going on with you since you were last on the show, and then maybe you can hand it off to Kirsty.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hi, I'm Zafira. I'm a copywriter and I'm a brand strategist. And I've always helped entrepreneurs with unblocking their voice and harnessing their creative energy, telling sensory stories that really connect with your audience. And since I was last on the show, I have a child, and we'll get into that a little bit later on in the interview. But I've been easing my way back in over the last kind of 8 months after maternity leave, and just getting back on my feet, which has been really fun and a creative journey as well. So I'm so excited to be here and talk about one of the creative projects that included later on that I did with Kirsty.
And hi, I'm Kirsty. I am a copywriter, a coach, and a strategist who's really concerned with the context of what makes your business a really good fit for you. So that is what my work is all about. I also have a baby, and that will become obvious as Zafira and I do talk about that creative project and why we're on here today. And by the time this episode goes live, I probably would have had my second baby as well. So it's a bit of a crazy time, just trying to fit everything in, but an exciting time as well.
Oh, this is so fun. So congratulations to both of you for your wonderful blessings and all the fun things that have been going on. I think that it's such a fun journey. I mean, myself personally, I have 3 boys, and when we're recording this, they just went back to school, and it was just like a crazy whirlwind of chaotic, did you get this? Is that like, what's that? Like, what's going on? So you are in good company here. And I know so many of our listeners are parents, and then they are just trying to figure out, how do you do this online business thing? How are we supposed to record things when there's screaming people in the other room that you can't just throw snacks at and say, hey, go do stuff? I mean, you can when they get to a certain age. So I'm just letting y'all know of what's ahead in your future. But I want to talk about your project. So y'all teased it out a little bit, which, I mean, y'all are great copywriters, strategists, right? You knew what you were doing. But we are here today to talk about your creative project, Business After Baby. And I told you before we started recording, my audience, like we're all just a bunch of nerds. We want to hear all the behind the scenes. So how did this project come about? What's the origin story? We want to know all the things. So Kirstie, actually, I'm going to go to you first. Like, can you tell us a story?
Yeah, sure. And I'll try and remember, but it's been a bit of a blur as well. So Zafira, if I forget pieces, please fill me in. So Zafira and I have known each other, I think since 2018. Is that right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, which feels like an age ago now. So we met in a mastermind for copywriters, and we met in person a few times at various events. Zafira is based in Canada. I'm based in Australia. So it was really cool to have a chance to hang out in person those few times that we did. And then we both became pregnant with our first kids a few months apart. So my little boy, Ollie, is a few months older than Zafira's little girl. And I think when we were both on maternity leave, we were WhatsApping each other or sending DMs on Instagram with voice notes, just sharing some of those struggles and insights and like, oh my God, like WTF is happening. And, how are we going to fit this in with business, and particularly the businesses that we both have, which really are an extension of ourselves, and how we like to spend our time and how we like to show up for people. So it's not like we had the kind of businesses where, they could run pretty much unaffected without us being actively in them. So as we were trying to navigate that, we realized that there weren't a whole lot of resources out there for, helping to answer some of those questions, or even to get some visibility on what some of those challenges and decisions would be. So a few months after being back at work, I can't remember who reached out to who now, but we sort of tentatively started chatting about the idea of maybe building a podcast together, just a limited series, kind of like a passion project, I guess, 6 episodes. Yeah, just talking through that whole experience, what it was like for us, and just being really open about, I guess, the mix of the personal changes and identity shifts, as well as the business side of things too. So as far as my memory serves me, I think that's how we got started.
That's incredible. I love that this unfolded organically. I'm sure it was this idea of the back and forth, because I have friends like that too, where you just go back and forth and you go back and forth. And when you have, I think, the spirit that I feel all three of us have is like that creative energy of, man, we just figured out something, or we stumbled upon something that we know there's dozens, maybe hundreds, thousands of other people that are experiencing this exact same thing. And why don't we share the thing that we're figuring out in real time? Because it's not like y'all had figured out motherhood and parenthood and y'all were like, we are the champions. Like here we are. We deserve our medals now. Like y'all were in the thick of it. And you said, there's got to be some other people out there struggling with this. So Zafira, I would love to know, what was the process like for y'all to decide, okay, we're going to do this? Did y'all have any imposter syndrome where you like, wait, this is so wild? And why did you choose a podcast over another medium to share the resources and the information that y'all had?
Oh, good question. So I think in terms of how we first kind of dove in, Kirstie and I had this one Google Doc that's still titled Kirstie and Zafira Motherhood Entrepreneurship Podcast, and that's still what it's called. It was nameless. It just had a topic, and we both were just brain dumping ideas in there for months, I think, up until we're like, we should probably record this thing. And for both of us on opposite sides of the world to like get on the same time and like be sure it was toddler proofed and everything. Was a challenge, but once we got into it, like I was looking forward to it every week. We did it like back to back over the course of a month, and it was so fun. But basically we just, keeping it real, we were both moms, we were both running businesses, both forget things. I both have brain fog once in a while. I almost forgot about this interview today, even though I've been looking forward to it for weeks, and had to pry my lip gloss out of my daughter's hands like 5 minutes before I got here. So it's real. So that Google Doc was being filled up in between all those moments, and it was so rich and so full of ideas. And to kind of add on to what Kirstie was sharing in the beginning about how we got started, I think we both have a little bit of a spicy side to us, which is when we're feeling like, oh, this can just be better, or this just isn't right, or this, we just have something to say about this. I think we also caught each other in our spiciness at like various points in our journey. And Kirstie was really generous with me in saying that, like, you're the person I want to do this with, but it was very much her brainchild. So yeah, the Google Doc was the ground upon which we started building all of this on. And then I think in terms of why we decided to do a podcast, I can't remember any particular reason other than, Kirstie has her own podcast that she hosts with someone else, and I knew she was already seasoned at it. I think for me, it was just appealing because I've always dabbled with the idea of, having a podcast, but the consistency and doing it all the time felt overwhelming. So the idea of like a limited series seemed really appealing and, really neat and structured. And let's be honest, like having video involved would have just been really challenging anyways at that point in our lives. So it worked for me. I don't know about you, Kirstie, if you had any other ideas or if that was just the way you wanted to do it.
No, I think to echo all that, I feel like it felt like the lightest lift. And I think there was probably also, at least for me, like a selfish element there of like, I'd love the chance to just have 1 hour long conversations with Zafira about motherhood and business. Like 5 hours of that sounds amazing to me.
But you could also write it off as like, oh no, this is business. Like we're just, it's girl time and we're catching up. But this is 100% business. Like I'm in my office. I've got my computer. This is business. Yes. We're absolutely going to chalk it up to that.
Absolutely.
Well, since you're talking about recording, so, I have two questions that just popped in my head, but I want to go with this one first because you both kind of mentioned it. The limited series. So how did you settle on this? Was that kind of, for you, Zafira, were you thinking, oh, that sounds fun, but I can't make that long-term commitment. Let's do a limited series, because I know that there's a lot of people that ask me about seasons. So personally, I don't do seasons on my podcast. I just it's one long podcast and there is a ton of episodes, but I do know that there's people that like to hear the idea of different perspectives, and a limited series is one that I've heard people do for private podcasts, but we haven't talked a lot about those for public podcasts. So I'd love to kind of understand the decisions that y'all made about just having 6 episodes and putting it out there, and then what that looked like.
Ooh,
so either one of you. Yeah.
Yeah, Kirstie, I think you probably had a really clear outline at the beginning. Do you want to share a little bit more around that?
Yeah, sure. I'm like, God, this feels like so long ago now. So we actually did. So for like behind the scenes nerdery, we did record a test episode that never made it to air. And that test episode, I think, was fun for us, but it lacked a lot of structure. And when we listened back to it, we were like, that was a bit of a mess. Like it was really just inviting people into the chaos of our days and our minds of like motherhood and business in that week. So after listening to that, we did go in and set a structure for what each episode could cover. So we did like sort of focused on one time period per episode. So obviously with something like, pregnancy, and then that immediate postpartum period, and then maternity leave itself, and then coming back to work, finding your feet, and then making a business that fits. So I think that helped set the number of episodes. But I do think for both of us, because the podcast wasn't, and it is definitely aligned with the way that we both like to work and the work that we do, but it's also not a primary lead gen, like, this is going to bring people directly into our money-making offers. So I think for both of us, it was important that it was sort of like a passion project, and we gave it the right container for that, because I think to be investing, it costs money to edit a podcast, to host on a platform, all those sorts of things. To be doing that continually, as well as having the time when we both have young kids, it didn't feel like the right fit. So I think it was, again, all these contextual factors that sort of came together that made us land on the idea of doing that limited series. But Zafira, if I missed something. Like, is this correct?
No, I think that's really exactly what I was thinking. And I'll just add that I think the reason why we didn't overthink it and the way we laid it out is, like she said, I think we were not attached to an outcome other than expression creatively and being able to start conversations or hold space for those conversations to, just happen between people in our community. We kept joking with each other that as episodes got released over time, we knew everyone who was pregnant and we knew everyone who hadn't revealed it yet. And people who even had kids who were older were like, wow, I never got a chance to have these conversations, but listening in to how you two did it just really made me feel more seen. And that's really, I think that was our purpose. So we didn't go into it looking at it as like a long-term strategy for anything. It was purely just like, yeah, a little passion baby.
That's perfect. And I love hearing that because, as I was listening to the episodes, I was like, this is so fun because like you said, and, your listeners gave you this feedback of, we go through these journeys and a lot of the conversations that y'all were having typically happen like in my own head. I didn't say them to a friend of mine or a coworker or, my parents, like my mom, or even sometimes even my husband, like some of the things that y'all were talking about. And it was absolutely a way to feel super seen. So I think it's just a great way to point out that the genuine authenticity that you shared in there. And it wasn't like y'all were sharing like the behind the scenes, like so much of like your personal life. Cause I think people get very like walls up, guards up. I am not sharing any of my personal life, but y'all didn't do that, but you also did. So can you like explain a little bit for each of you personally, what that's like do you have a boundary around what you're comfortable sharing on podcasts yourself or in other people's content? Like, is there a filter that you process or you overshare and then you learn and you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. Like, what does that look like for either one of you?
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Ooh, Kirstie, do you have thoughts to share? Otherwise, I can go first.
You go.
All right, I'll go. I don't think that there is a perfect rule book for this, and we were for me, anyways, I was definitely figuring it out as we went along. And I think it's something you learn also just as a creative in general when you're telling stories about your daily life, when you're a marketer, when you're a writer. I'm writing a book right now. I'm trying to figure out, who do I include? Who do I not include? What do I write about? What do I not write about? And for me personally, like any boundaries I had around our podcast was just mentioning my daughter's name. That's just something my husband and I were, choose to do with content. And I generally don't post pictures of her or anything like that. So that's our personal boundary. But I think in terms of what I was sharing inside the podcast, I think I was just mindful of like being as honest as I can. And just also being as respectful as I can of whoever I was mentioning or whatever I was talking about, so that, should any of those folks listen in, they would know, that I uphold like certain standards or certain levels of privacy for sure. But also knowing that it kind of defeats the purpose of the podcast if we don't get vulnerable to some extent, right? So I think Kirstie and I found our balance there, and also making sure we were really clear in what our content was going to be about really helped inform that, knowing it was this blend of coming in as a seasoned entrepreneur, going through this journey, finding their way back, her and I had so many parallels that were actually really freaky at some points, just like how similar they were and also how we felt like creatively, that I think we just found that vulnerability in each other as well and helped kind of draw out those little pieces. So I don't know if I really answer that, but I think there's no clear cut answer, but I just did my best with what I could.
What about you, Kirsty? Do you have anything that you were thinking, okay, from the get-go, I may or may not share this, or were you felt like an open book? Because you we were talking about earlier, you already have a podcast and you have this experience of possibly sharing a lot more than Zafira may have had in the past. So how was that for you?
Such a good question. And like Zafira, I'm like, oh, how can I articulate this in a really like concrete way? And I don't know if I can, but I'm going to try. So I do like to share probably a bit more of myself than some entrepreneurs, I think, because I think that there's so much humanness in the experience of owning a business and certainly in the experience of having a baby and being a mum. But I'm also very careful to make sure that the details and thoughts and experiences and feelings that I'm sharing are my own. Mm-hmm. Because if I can own them, obviously I think then it's okay for me to give permission for those things to be out in the world. Whereas I would never talk about, for example, my husband's feelings about something because that's his choice. And, if he ever wanted to share that on any platform, I don't think he ever would. He's not that kind of person. But, so I think that would be like a breaking of trust. So thinking about that to another context, like if you're talking about working with clients, for example, like, which pieces of that experience are yours to share as opposed to which could be really blurring that boundary and stepping into someone else's shoes and talking on their behalf. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of how I draw that line.
Oh yeah, I think that absolutely helps because, and it's interesting. So this is why I wanted to hear both of your perspectives because y'all aren't the exact same. And I know that I've talked to other people that have co-host and this can be kind of a rift between hosts, like where they decide, I don't know if this is going to work out because one person does want to be like the one that's like, let me share it all. My life is an open book. I want to tell you what I ate yesterday for lunch. And I want to tell you like all these juicy details about my life. And then there's somebody else that's like, no. I don't want to share anything. So they are polar opposites of the spectrum. And that can be challenging if you're trying to get into that creative space where you both have this like mutual respect for each other. But I think that y'all have something that's so beautiful is you already had a relationship. Like you already had a working relationship, a personal relationship. And then you were like, let's go do something fun together. So I think it was a lot easier. So if anybody's listening and you're actively looking for a co-host or looking for someone to do a creative project like this with, start looking in your friend group and your immediate circle, because that's more likely where you're going to find people that you trust, that you feel comfortable having those vulnerable moments, because it's so important when you go into a creative project like this. I don't know if either one of y'all have anything else to share on that, but.
Yeah, I do. I would say, and Zafira mentioned this, I remember when we were talking about the idea, I was like, if you don't want to do this, like, that's fine. I'm just going to shelve the idea because I only want to do it with you. And I think one of the reasons for that was that the very first time I met Zafira in person, I was just blown away by the thoughtfulness of your communication and how everything you shared is just so considered. Like, I wish I had that skill. I feel like I'm just more like blah. So having conversations with you and having the experience of always having those conversations go somewhere really deep or meaningful or end up being so resonant, I was like, these are the kind of conversations I think would have that same effect for other people listening. So just to add, yeah, like definitely, think about who you already know and think about your experience of talking about things or, explaining things with them and, how would that actually perform on a platform? How would that resonate with your audience? Thinking about those kinds of questions.
That's great. Oh. Yeah. Go ahead, Zafira. You have anything else to add?
Well, that was just very sweet, Kirstie. Thank you very much. And I'll add like what I love about Kirstie's personality. She's able to bring such, humor and fun and lightness to things while at the same time getting really deep and getting very real and tactical. So that's just like a really beautiful blend you don't find everywhere. And she's one of the smartest people I know. So doing this with her, I think also, I think it's important definitely to think about the people where you can have conversations with them and you lose track of time almost, or you're not waiting to close out the hour or get the bill. And like every time I spend time with Kirstie, or every time we do have conversations, like I'm 100% not watching the time, because we can go deep and we can just get there like quite quickly. So I knew it would be just really fun to do. So, and that's the thing. I think also just being able to have fun in the process is so crucial to really getting the best out of each other. And even though our boundaries or the way we navigate things might be different. I also had conversations with her, like you said, that I've actually never had with anyone else, like even in my own household, because no one else could relate on those very specific levels of things we were talking about. So finding the right partner is really just, I think, perfect blend of all of the above.
Well, and y'all have teased it so well. So, I mean, this should go without saying, but everybody needs to go listen to their podcast, because I can vouch for their conversations being so candid and so beautiful. And y'all mentioned this earlier, but having that consideration for different people going through different stages. Like I think y'all did this so beautifully. Like there was one where y'all were talking about maternity leave being so different in different places, and just those conversations that may happen in your little local region where you are, like you're thinking about your hometown. But then when you think about, you put a podcast out to a global audience, you don't know exactly who's listening and where they're listening from, what their situation is. So I just want to point that out. I thought that y'all do such a great job at just having that conversation. And I felt like I was just sitting there listening to you, and it was so good. So good. So y'all did a great job.
Thank you. That's so nice to hear.
Yes. But I want to get into, we're going to switch gears for a second, because my listeners love the juicy details. So I want to know, is there something that was challenging at the beginning that it was such a big mountain to climb? You were like, this is so hard. Like, I don't know how we're going to figure it out. This is the thing that's keeping us stuck. But now you look back and you're like, that was not that big of a deal. It was really easy to figure out. And then like we were making it so much more dramatic than it needed to be. Is there anything that stands out in your mind?
I'll be trying to think
about anything, to be very honest, besides getting an hour of silence in my home. This honestly felt so not 100% effortless, of course, but it felt really seamless for me anyways. I don't know. What about you, Kirstie?
Yeah, no, same for me. I was like, oh God, I don't have an answer for this one. Because I think the help that the process was very organic as well. So it was quite low pressure. It always felt really smooth and enjoyable. And yeah, like you said, Zafira, probably the biggest challenge for us was just logistically, like, on wildly different time zones with 2 toddlers and different, care arrangements, are we actually going to be able to find a time to record this? And, how many of those times we're going to have to reschedule? But I think in the end, we only had to reschedule one of them. And that was easy. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think this is probably also, Crystal, because, this wasn't a lead generator. This didn't have like a massive launch behind it. If we wanted to change the date of when it goes live, like we could have, no one was going to be, breathing fire up our butts or anything like that. So we were able to take a relatively chill approach. And there were definitely things like I forgot about along the way. And, we were just like, oh, we'll figure it out. Oh, we need podcast art now. Okay. Oh, we need this thing now. Okay. All right. But like, we just figured it out. We just made it happen.
Well, and it's funny too, because I feel like y'all have an unfair advantage because you're both copywriters, and I love the name of your podcast. So where did Business After Baby come from? How many ideas were there? Because I know you said that it was like the baby bit, like entrepreneur, business, motherhood podcast. Like, how did you finally settle on Business After Baby?
I think it was Kirstie's idea.
Yeah. I was like, this is a good name. I was like, this is simple. It's quite fun to say. Got a bit of alliteration there.
Yeah, we love alliteration.
Yeah. We do, as copywriters. I'll see if I can bring that Google Doc up in case we did have like a suggestion of names. But I'm pretty sure that was just,
I don't even remember.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I remember, Zafira, you posting on your Instagram, you were kind of teasing out, like as it was coming, I was like, oh, we have this new project coming. And you had, I think, a few options for the artwork. And so I feel very connected to the artwork because I helped vote for it. I was like, okay, like I'm gonna need to vote for this. So but I love what y'all chose. So can you tell us about that? Like, is that something that y'all designed yourself? Did you hire a graphic designer, or how did that process look like?
I just said I would take a crack at it. And I sent Kirstie a couple options. And we settled on that kind of final image. And then we were just super torn about colors. And I remember Kirstie telling me that's the one thing she cannot do is pick between colors. So we decided to put it out to the internet, and I should never, ever give her a paint swatch ever. So yeah, we did. And I was shocked at how split the results were and how impassioned people were about like making a case for one color versus the other. I have a lot of folks in my personal audience who are like artists and designers and stuff, and they're like, no, it needs to be this way because of this. And other people are like, well, I know both of you, and like this fits better. And in the end, what ended up working out well was someone gave me some really good advice to kind of like test it on like what it would look like on a podcast page on Spotify, on Apple, or whatever, and kind of see what popped more. So every designer loves to hear, just make it pop. And that's how we settled on it. But again, because this was such a creative and fun project, that was also a really nice way to just put my creative hat on for a bit and just take it for a ride.
So and I have to say, like, we're so lucky that Zafira has those design skills, because I remember trying to do a mock-up of like the audiogram post on Canva. It was like a preschooler had done it. I was like, okay, I'm just going to send this to Zafira with some like explanations about what I'm thinking would look good. And then she like did it in a heartbeat. So I think without that skill set, we probably would have had to hire someone. But yeah, thankfully Zafira has.
We all have our strengths. Thanks.
So I was going to say, that's teamwork. It's just pure teamwork is what that is. Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Yeah.
But I love saying this. And, you know, I've heard you both say this a few times. It's like, well, this wasn't really a lead generator. Well, this is just a creative project and this is this. But at the same time, there are people listening right now that is where they're starting from too, is they're like, I don't really know that I want to be a podcaster. I don't know if this is for me. I tried YouTube and it didn't work. I've tried a blog before and it didn't work. And so they're in this mindset of really wrapping themselves around all of these details. So I think that it's a blessing for y'all to say, we just kind of tried things out and we threw it out to our audience. We got some feedback. We listened to some, we didn't listen to others. And then you kind of just settled on what worked and you were off to the races. So I think that that's a gift that you are absolutely giving my audience, and just sharing your real journey and how some things may have had a little bit heavier weight decision on them, and other things you're like, I don't care. Let's just go. Let's just go. Let's just hang out together and have a great conversation.
Exactly.
So I have a question about the Q&A portion. So is that something that y'all had decided from the very beginning, that y'all wanted to have questions from the audience and people that you knew, or is that something that happened organically as y'all started planning the content? Like, how did that work for you?
We were pretty set that we wanted to have a Q&A episode from the beginning, just because we, like, you know, even though we were having the conversations that we wish we'd had access to while we were in those stages, we also didn't really know, like, you know, is this going to help people in the right way? Is it going to speak to the, you know, really relevant concerns or questions they have? So we wanted a platform, I think, to just open up to people in case they were like, this is cool, guys, but like, I'm really worried about this, or can you give me some insights on that? So yeah, it was sort of baked in there from the beginning.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I love that. I love the questions from the community and just having people involved in it. I think it's just so much more fun to listen to it whenever it's just like, you feel like you're part of a community. And I think that the premise of your podcast from the beginning is community, is the, you know, the through line of motherhood, parenthood, entrepreneurship, all of it blending together in this beautiful whirlwind of chaos that we all live. I mean, the three of us here, especially, like, it's so incredible. And I'm grateful that you put this out into the world, because now I get to chat with you and we get to talk about it. And this is a fantastic, like, y'all are going to be my case study for a public limited series podcast, which is, again, why I wanted to have you on the show today. But is there any one big thing that you were like, okay, if I ever do something like this again, a creative project similar to this in your business, or for another, charitable cause, charitable endeavor, would you do anything differently?
Like, I need to insert some thinking music here because both Zafira and I are like,
Insert elevator music. I'll say what's top of mind for me. I think it was really fun going into it creatively. However, I did not expect the engagement and like the connection to it to be as strong as it was. Not to say I didn't believe in it. I think just, it was like casting a net out to sea kind of thing, right? And now, fielding questions like, will there be a season 2? Yesterday, someone dropped into my DMs, was like, are you going to be taking guests for the next one? Or I have all these things to say. And I'm like, ellipses. And I think if I was going to do something like this again, I maybe would have a little bit of a longer term lens, not even necessarily strategy, but to be like, okay, if this goes well, then what next, right? And I think we just didn't really have the luxury of that at the time. And we were harnessing our creative energy and channeling it into this project. And we're just like, oh, we'll see what happens. But I think it's been proven to me over and over again that like good things happen, and you are really rewarded when you just come from a place of creativity and you come from a place of passion. And I have to just keep reminding myself of that. And that did come up when, all the episodes dropped. I'm like, oh, that felt so good. I'm like, I don't think I would want to do it again, but like, maybe I kind of want to do it again, or maybe I want to do it in a different way. And so I would maybe just think about that longer term lens and what it would really mean for me, and also how it would just connect to like all the other purposes and things I'm doing in the world, so I could bring it full circle, Yeah. What about
so
you,
interesting.
Kirstie?
Well, I was going to say, because I feel like, and totally, like it did, I think, I also had lots of responses in my DMs and my inbox about like, oh, you're going to take guests, I volunteer, I'd love to come on next season. I'm like, what next season? So I think it did take on a life of its own. But I also, for me personally, I think that the fact that we didn't try and make it bigger or like think longer term or have any wild goals for it made it free and easy in the moment. And actually, interestingly, I had a strategy session client yesterday who booked because of the podcast, and she's the second one. So even though it's not, as we've spoken about, it wasn't, designed as like a pure lead gen strategy for our services or our products, like it is still bringing me clients and bringing me bookings. So that's interesting for me as well. But that's a nice surprise, I think. It's like I'm being delighted by that, because it's like, oh, this is like a bonus. But in terms of things I would do differently, I honestly can't think of something, which sucks because, well, actually it's great because it means the experience was wonderful and I do it again in a heartbeat. But in terms of like being able to offer insight to people, it's not very helpful. So I'm sorry.
No, this is great. This is all fantastic. Y'all have added so much value in this conversation today. So everything that you have said is so appreciative. And I want to say too, because, y'all have talked about just kind of going into it from a place of, we don't really know what to expect, but I think you also led with value and generosity. It's something that I talk about a lot on here, is leading with value, even if you're not sure what's going to happen in return. But I feel like y'all really leaned into that, and you knew that someone would benefit from those conversations and that information that you were sharing. And I think that that's a key point in the success of this show, and people saying, when's season 2 coming? Like, can I be a guest? I think it's because you led with value, and that just leaning into it I mean, it's karma. I'm a big believer in karma and just putting things out into the universe. And I think that y'all did this so beautifully with this project. So thank you, because I feel like it's just such a fantastic, fantastic show.
Thank you. It's so nice to hear. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Well, we're going to move into our last segment, which is always interesting when we have two people, but it's rapid fire questions. So I have 3 rapid fire questions, and Zafira's eyes just got big. She's like, I don't remember what I said last time in any of these, which is great because we like to see different answers every time we have a guest on the show. So Zafira, I am going to go to you first, and then Kirstie, I'll come to you. But the first one is, what piece of advice would you give to a brand new podcaster?
Oh my God. Okay. First piece of advice. Well, I think have the conversations you would have over and over again without getting bored of them. And that can always, have new life each time. I think when you go into creating something that feels really limited to that window of time, people can feel it when it starts kind of losing that passion. So yeah, think about the conversations you would have every single day. And it's not a rapid fire answer, but sorry.
That's fantastic. It's great. It's great. What about you, Kirstie?
I would say be open to reading the room, because I think every time you try something new, whether it's a podcast or something else, you're experimenting to some degree. And I think if you have that open stance to feedback and you're able to tune into how it's been received, how it's working or not working, you can then make more informed decisions as you go, and shape it into something that, helps you achieve the goals that you set for it.
Oh, that's so good. So good. Okay. Well, Kirstie, I'm going to come back to you. And this one is a 2-part question. And it is, what is your dream podcast you would love to be on? And who is your dream podcast guest?
Oh my God, these are huge questions.
I'm like, Zafira's like, oh, I get to think about this one for a second.
Okay, so dream podcast I'd love to be on. There's an Australian podcast, I don't know if you guys would have heard of it, called The Imperfects.
Okay.
It is so good. I can highly recommend it. It's not about business necessarily. It's more just about the experience of being human and about how we all have faults and we all have challenges and the different ways we all approach and navigate those. So definitely my kind of conversations. I'm not famous enough to be on there, but maybe one day, 30 years from now, you never know.
Putting it out there, putting it out into the universe.
That's right. And in terms of a guest, that's so hard. There are so many interesting people to choose from. I don't know. I feel like someone that, whenever I hear him on a podcast, I'm like, oh, your brain's just fascinating. Like Seth Godin. And I know he's kind of that's an easy answer because it's Seth Godin, but still, I would never say no to having a conversation with him about how his brain works in terms of marketing and business.
Oh, that's a fantastic one. That's a great one. What about you, Zafira? Who's your dream?
Oh my God.
Dream podcast you'd love to be on and your dream guest?
I think I would love to maybe, get to a place in my life where I've built a couple of things and be on Guy Raz's podcast, as a creator. That would be a huge, huge goal, huge dream. And recently, in terms of a guest, I've been reading the works of Maggie Smith, who's an awesome poet and storyteller. And she writes about actually motherhood and navigating marriage and all these beautiful human experiences. And if there's anyone I would have conversations with, also with Kirstie, I think we would have a really good one.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So my last question, and I'm going to do this in a fun way. Maybe it's going to be chaotic, but it's fine. It's, it'll be perfectly fine. So I'm going to ask you the question and then I'm going to give you a countdown. It's going to be yes or no. And then you're going to answer at the same time. Okay. So y'all are going to maybe surprise each other with the answer, but okay. Are you ready? You're so confused. You're like, what's happening? But we're just going to do this and see what happens.
I feel nervous.
I'm really sweaty.
It's an easy question, but it's yes or no. Okay. Do you consider yourself a perfectionist? 3, 2, one. Yes or no?
No.
Yes.
So for the audience listening, who said yes?
Zafira, me.
Zafira. And Kirsty said no.
No. Yeah.
So does anybody
This is
have
why
any
we're a
thoughts
good
to
match.
share about it? I was going to say, I think that's a match made in heaven.
And that's also why my answer of like, what would I do different? I'd be like, oh, I would like maybe like look in the long term and like plan even more. Whereas Kirstie is probably like, girl, just chill. Like,
Just do it. Just do it. Oh my goodness. Well, this is so fun. I think that this was an episode that will resonate with everyone listening. I am so appreciative of you two coming on to the show and sharing your thoughts, sharing your behind the scenes, and sharing your experience, because I know it helps somebody today on their journey. Can you tell everybody where they can find a little bit more about you and the podcast? So, Zafira, I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, well, you can connect with me through my website, which is zafirarajan.com, or on Instagram at zafira.rajan. And you can find the podcast by typing in Business After Baby, wherever you get your podcast. And I'm sure we will give you all the relevant links you can pop in the show notes.
What about you, Kirsty?
Yeah, so you can find me at kirstiefanton.com or on Instagram at kirsty.fanton. And always love having conversations about anything related to business or motherhood. So if you want to reach out, don't be shy.
Well, y'all say that, but then you're going to have people are going to hear this and they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to reach out to them and say season 2, like I'm coming for it. Like you're going to have a whole, like we love guesting on podcast in this audience. So y'all don't spam their DMs with all of your ideas for like go listen to the podcast first. And then maybe you can spam them with ideas, but you got to go listen to the podcast first for that privilege. So thank y'all so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Crystal. You're amazing.
Thanks for having us.
I just want to throw this out there because I know I say it, but I don't think that you can say it enough. I am so grateful for the conversations that I get to have on this podcast. I really am, because so much of the content that you see here that we're creating behind the scenes, a lot of it is out of a selfish intent of I see someone doing something really cool or something I'm interested in, and I just want to know more about it. That is exactly where this conversation came from today. Zafira and I were actually going to have an interview scheduled several months ago. And, something came up and we just started chatting back and forth. And she said, I don't know if I want to keep talking about the same things that are going on in my business right now or doing this. And I just like lovingly nudged her. I was like, hey, I want to know about this podcast that you're doing. Cause she was like, I'm not really a podcaster. So I wanted to know, like, how did you, someone who said, I'm not really a podcaster, I'm not in love with this medium, it's not really for me. How did you, did someone convince you? Did someone twist your arm to create this podcast? I just want to know all the things. So I'm so grateful to Zafira and Kirsty for coming and sharing their story and just the message that they have. It's so much bigger than them, so much bigger than all of us, really. And I think it was just a great conversation that women need to have about how, motherhood affects your life, how it affects your entrepreneurship, your business. And I think anyone that's a parent or, is interested in that work-life balance medium, this is a great podcast to listen to. And I hope that you go check it out. So again, their show is called Business After Baby. And I love their artwork. We talked about that briefly, but the artwork is just so much fun. It's so cute. And I want you to go check out and listen to these really honest, vulnerable conversations that are just the sweet spot for a really good podcast. And I think that you'll enjoy it. So go check it out. Make sure you're following Zafira and Kirsty on Instagram. And I'm so grateful for these types of collaborations and the people that I get to bring to you that can add more value to your life and your business and help you create your content with confidence. But that's all I have for you today. So make sure you are following or subscribed to the podcast wherever you are listening. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.